Bases dropped. New edition Soccer Down here. It's a Tuesday. It's July 7th. We'll be taking your questions, your comments throughout the show. You can join in a bunch of different ways. Twitter, @SoccerDownHere. Twitch, twitch.tv/SoccerDownHere. Email, soccerdownhere@gmail. However you want to get in touch and get involved, please do so. A lot of stuff to get into. Dallas made some news yesterday. They were withdrawn from the MLS's back tournament, and the wording is a little interesting, and we'll get into that and some of the other conversations around it. Nashville reportedly is not looking very good in terms of their positive tests, and that's it. Those are the ones that were the two that had issues coming in. Nobody else has had more than a positive test. I think there might be one team that had two, or there might have been reported initially with two. It's been Dallas. They're out. It's been Nashville. We'll talk about the ramifications of all of that. You know, this is all really, really difficult to watch. As somebody who loves this game, loves this league, loves where American soccer is from where it was. This is hard to watch on multiple fronts because I think a lot of people are attacking the league for issues that Dallas had in their own market. There's been a lot of talk about the bubble, the issues in Orlando, which have nothing to do with what happened with Dallas. The biggest thing, and you're seeing it with Major League Baseball now, you're going to see it with the NFL once they create their plan to go forward. You've seen it, and more importantly, you've seen it because of the lack of foresight, the lack of planning on the college football side. This is not even just an MLS thing. This is a difficult thing no matter what. This is really hard. You're seeing it with schools. You're seeing it with a lot of businesses. You're seeing it with government agencies. It's very hard to do business right now. It's very important to do business right now. It's very difficult to. It's very difficult to do it safely. And you're going to have these issues. These things are going to happen during all of this. There's just no way around it. You can have every protocol. You can have everything possible. The only way you avoid it is a lockdown, or to bring people into a lockdown scenario after a long period of time to quarantine. And that's very difficult to make sure you can do and operate normally. So it's not, oh, MLS is stupid, they screwed up. Oh, Major League Baseball doesn't understand testing. You know, no. Like, this is hard. This is hard. And that's why school in the fall is going to be hard. That's why you're going to see, and we've already heard some announcements of major institutions that are going to go all online, all virtual. This is not going away, and these conversations are going to be had on every front. It's just that difficult, and MLS has had a major difficulty now with Dallas. So, look, here's what we know at this point. Don Garber made it clear that these games would be made up at some point. So there was some question about, will they be forfeits? No, they're going to have an opportunity to make these games up. The way it was worded, we'll get into that as we go, withdrawn, and there's been some talk about pressure from other teams potentially on MLS to remove Dallas from the tournament because of the issues they've had with so many positive tests. There's been questions, and I think there have to be, about how that happened. We've asked them. We don't know the answers. How did Dallas have problems that Atlanta didn't have, or that Kansas City didn't have, or that, whoever, name the team, didn't have? What's the difference? And that's something that needs to be examined. But just like with the NWSL, they had a huge issue. And 9 teams, 1 dropped out because of testing issues and positive tests, maybe not as many as people thought, but positive tests, and they dropped out of the tournament. And the NWSL has been able to round that corner and make everything work, and so far have a great event with no issues. That's what anybody trying to do any kind of sports right now has to be prepared to do. You know, luckily the Bundesliga, their only issue was a second division team that had a 14-day quarantine imposed by the local government. They handled it, got it done, finished the season, finished their promotion relegation playoff, finished their cup final. They got it done. Now, Germany's in a very different position with the virus. We know that, but they found a way to get this done, even with an early hiccup. Same with all the other leagues so far. You've been able to get things done. Along the way, you've had issues. You've had protocols have to change. You've had, the A-League right now trying to get their situation sorted out. They tried to get 3 teams inside of one of the hub cities before a shutdown of the border between 2 different areas of the country, and they weren't able to do it. Looks like they're going to be able to make that work. The government's going to work with them, but they're having that challenge. We mentioned the Chinese Super League. They're doing the hub model. This is what you're seeing more of in that idea of doing a hub in countries like Australia, like China, like the United States, that are bigger countries too, and you're dealing with bigger travel, which does factor into the decision to do a hub scenario. Nobody has all the answers, no matter what they try to tell you. We're all figuring this out as we go, and we're going to learn more as we go about all of it. That's what I've been reading and learning and trying to remind myself of when we get frustrated. Frustrated that Dallas isn't able to play. Frustrated that the tournament format is going to be different. Frustrated that it's not what we thought it would be, and frustrated that this is a negative on a tournament that you hoped would be a big positive. It is what it is at this point. You have to try to make the best of it and move on, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the tournament. We'll see what happens with Nashville, because there's going to be questions now with reports that some of those presumptive positives are going to be positive, and we're waiting on official word there.
Yeah, Shiva is in early this morning, and she's like, isn't Nashville supposed to play tomorrow? We should expect to hear something by today regarding their game, right?
Yeah, it's all difficult. And look, we mentioned it yesterday, and I think it's an important thing that has been either left out of the conversation or intentionally downplayed in the conversation. The original plan had MLS teams coming to Orlando for 3 weeks before playing games. Week of individual training, week of group training, week of full team training. That was pretty quickly pushed back to 2 weeks of full team training. That's when the initial conversation started about Orlando. That was when the conversations were going on about pay cuts and CBAs, et cetera, et cetera. That was cut way back. Now, it was cut way back for multiple reasons. There was pushback from the players. There was a lot of pushback in the media about that, saying it was too long for players to be out of market. Also, at that time, and I think this is an important thing to understand how fast things are changing. At that time, it was also becoming more apparent that you could train in your own market, which was not likely at the beginning of this. This tournament the idea didn't come up yesterday. The idea was starting to be developed in April. In April, you didn't have many teams that could conduct full team training in their market. That was part of the process for Orlando. I would think that part of the process as well was that quarantine period, and that idea of a quarantine period, which was very common in the conversations about Germany restarting and the UK and the Premier League restarting, and Spain and Italy was a quarantine period before playing. It was knocked down for multiple reasons, not just because of the pushback from the PA or the media, the idea that teams could train in their own market. You'd rather do that if you can. But as we're finding out, when teams come in later, you don't have that quarantine period. And I think we're also finding out, and this is a big issue with Major League Baseball right now, and this is going to become more of the conversation. Look, Dallas tested all their players, I think 3 times in the 3 days or 4 days before going to Orlando. You tested twice in the 72 hours before the flight, and then you had your regular testing, which goes on every other day. The players who tested positive, and 2 of them, according to the reports, originally it was 1, now it's being said that it's 2, that tested positive upon arrival. When they tested positive, they had tested negative 3 times in the preceding days to get on that plane. In Major League Baseball, you had teams that canceled workouts yesterday because they couldn't get test results from tests that happened on Friday. And you had some that had inconclusive results and situations where you're having to do follow-ups. The testing situation has dramatically changed over this time frame. Remember, at the very beginning, the conversation was, are you going to be able to get enough tests? You can't take tests away from the general public. Then, and we got into a lot of the details of this, the testing availability in Florida was comparable to the testing availability in Germany when the tournament was put together with some specific details. Well, now things have changed quickly with outbreaks, and there is more testing going on because more people are concerned about having the virus. So there is more of a, I think, demand on the labs and on getting results back, and it's slowing down the process and maybe making the process a little more questionable in terms of the results and the accuracy, because that has to be a question in the Dallas situation. How did you have that many tests come back correct in terms of no coronavirus, and then immediately upon arrival 2 test positive, and then more test positive in the next days? How did that happen? The testing issue, and I think it's because we're connecting the dots with this and MLS, because Nashville's in the same boat. They had players that tested clear and then tested positive in Orlando. So Dallas and Nashville, you have questions about testing. Major League Baseball, I mean, how many teams was it who had to cancel sessions yesterday? Washington and Houston canceled workouts on Monday because they had not gotten their results back from Friday's tests. The Cardinals canceled their workout later on Monday over testing delays, and Oakland were waiting on test results before deciding to work out Monday night.
4.
I mean, and that's all over the country. So it's not like you're looking at, okay, Texas because of Dallas and Houston. Well, Texas has got problems with their testing. Well, no, you got St. Louis, you got Oakland, you got Washington, you got Nashville. That's going to be an issue for the NFL as they start to test to come back. It's going to be an issue for college. It's an issue for all of us because testing has become less efficient. Now, you hear reports and you really hope that you're going to get better tests, cheaper tests, and quicker result tests, and more accurate tests very, very quickly. But this has been a conversation at the world level, but especially in this country, for months, outside of sports. And the testing is going to be a huge issue with having sports available to happen. If you don't have proper testing, you run into this situation. And the leagues don't control that testing. You can buy the testing. You can buy it. You can secure it. You can be ready to test everybody. The results, that's a lab. It's not Don Garber with a lab coat on and goggles telling you what the results of the tests are.
And in MLB, it is a lab in Utah.
And I don't know what it is in MLS. I'd be curious because I believe, and this was from the original reporting, MLS was providing all the testing in Orlando, where everybody's under the same roof. But in market, they were not. That was on the individual teams. And that brings up the question. what kind of testing was being done in Dallas and Nashville? Was it the same level? Was it the same type of testing that you saw in other cities? Don't know. But those are questions that need to be answered to find this breakdown and find this issue. I think the other element, because it's come up a lot about, Orlando, and it's all because of Orlando. If Dallas and Nashville were playing in a league match in their market, you'd still have this issue. Unless the testing in Dallas is so incorrect that this would have never come up, and the same in Nashville, and then they would have played. And that's not good. So there's a breakdown here. And I don't think it's the league protocol that's the breakdown, because you're not seeing an outbreak among other teams. You're not seeing interaction among other teams. The breakdown is the national breakdown with this. The breakdown is the fact that now you have to question test results, and you're already set up to test every other day, which is significant. I mean, are you going to have to go to testing every day? Are you going to have to find a different type of testing in market? Because I don't know if that problem goes away after this tournament when you're trying to play games in late August, early September, and now you've got to question the testing in Dallas and in Nashville and how accurate it is.
You're looking at frequency. You're looking at all of these tests heading in one direction, in theory. You're heading toward, in Major League Baseball's case, it is all these tests heading in one direction toward one lab in Utah, and it is 7 days a week, and they have been at this trying to come up with results, and so you're going to have bottlenecks and log jams, and with all of this pressure on these labs in each and every sport, there's going to be, sadly, you're going to see things probably slip through the cracks when it comes to accuracy of testing and administering of testing and all of this stuff coming into that bottom of the funnel, coming from the big end to the small end of the funnel, and you're trying to cram all this stuff in there, and you're going to have moments like this.
Yeah, Joe Johnstone on Twitch said, do we know the validity and integrity of the tests being used? How accurate are they? We don't. That hasn't been reported on, so we don't know. It's an absolutely valid question. And have you been following? I know in baseball there were some questions about the type of testing being used and that sort of stuff, and I can't remember where else it was. There was question about, are they doing PCR testing or are they doing something else? Do you have any information on that, John?
I remember what you're talking about, but I can't think about who it was off the top of the head.
I thought it was in baseball. It was like one PCR. It was like a PCR was the way it was administered. I know where you're going, but I can't remember it off the top. Yeah, I don't know. I am not a testing expert. And now it sounds like we need to be, because you have to ask this question. I'm surprised it hasn't come up more at this point, in that why did they test clear in Dallas and in Nashville and not in Orlando?
Right.
I don't know. You had to ask the question about Orlando, or testing in Orlando, that the Orlando Pride did in the NWSL, because they had an issue with a lot of inconclusive tests and a lot of tests that upon follow-up were brought into question. I don't know if MLS is doing the same testing, same labs. There's a lot of that we just don't know. And I don't know if we're going to. I don't know if we're going to get those answers. Chris Ashley said, kind of sounds like Nashville may be shortly behind Dallas. Do we think Nashville gets pulled as well? It's not looking good for Nashville. Yeah. There's just no way that I think you can feel very positive about where Nashville is at the moment. And when you see Grant Wall's tweet from yesterday, I think this is important. I mean, Grant Wall's very connected. And he said, originally, his first tweet was, sources with knowledge of the situation tell me other MLS teams wanted FC Dallas out of the bubble tournament after not doing what was necessary to be virus-free and ready to play. Similar feelings about Nashville right now. And then Grant pointed out that the language in the official press release, Dallas was, quote, was withdrawn, not Dallas withdrew.
Yeah.
And he said other clubs wanted FCD out. And then he followed that up and he said, can totally understand where other MLS clubs are coming from. Quote, we did what we needed to do to be virus-free in the bubble. You guys didn't enough. That had not come up until Grant's tweet. Not that I had seen.
Yeah.
And it has to. It has to. And this is where the differences in the way the reactions have been honestly startling to me. Because go back to the reaction in the NWSL world to what happened with the Orlando Pride. The initial reaction about the Orlando Pride having the issues that they did, how fast had people pulled up somebody's Venmo activity to try to point a finger at a player? How fast did that happen?
Very.
It's crazy. I mean, it's not right. But that was the reaction is, oh, well, somebody screwed this up. We got to find out who did it. That hasn't been the conversation in Dallas. It's been the league screwed it up. The league stinks. The league's blowing this. And it's like, wait a minute, what? Why is there a difference? Grant's tweets are very important here. And I think it's going to be intriguing to see where this conversation goes. The Nashville situation is going to be part of that. I mean, Grant already tied them together in that. Yeah, if you're another team in this tournament and you did everything, if you're other players in this tournament and you did everything and you changed your behavior and you turned down going to, your kid's friend's birthday party, you turned down going to the store, you ordered more delivery and paid more for it, and you did these things to avoid it, to be ready to go into the bubble and not put other players and staff at risk, you're going to be mad about people who have come in and tested positive. Now, we know that it can happen accidentally. We know that. I mean, the mayor of Atlanta just tested positive, and I'm sure she's pretty well protected from having to do the normal things that we got to do on a regular basis about going to the grocery store, going to the pharmacy. It can happen. But if you're another player and you made those sacrifices and you're doing this, and you're sacrificing to be part of this tournament, you're sacrificing because you're away from your family at a difficult time. You are sacrificing, and when you see this happen, yeah, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating, and we don't know why, and that's the biggest frustration on my end, is we don't know why it happened. We don't know how it happened. We don't know how they were allowed, due to tests that showed they were fine, to get to Orlando and then find out that things were wrong. And they didn't test that way in Dallas. I don't know. I don't know the answers, and I don't know if we're going to get them, but all of it is very confusing. The reactions and the different reactions to what happened with the NWSL and MLS are very confusing to me. I don't know. I don't know what the right answers are, and I don't think anybody does, but it's difficult, and it's going to be the conversation until they get on the field, and it will potentially still be the conversation after the fact. And if you're the NBA, you're looking at this and you're making sure, one, that everybody gets into Orlando the 3 weeks before they play like they're planning to, because now you see how important that can be. You are also probably making sure that your safer barriers in your scheduling have as much cushion as you can, because you're going to have to be flexible. If you're the NHL, hey, it kind of worked out. You announced you were coming back first, but without a plan. Now it looks like you're ready to announce something. Well, you've learned a little bit from this. You have to do all of these things that you're learning from the MLS process and from the NWSL process. The NFL's paying attention. College conferences should be paying attention as well. You're learning on the fly, and you're having to adapt on the fly. And you have to try to make the best of it that you can. And again, the reason why is you're trying to keep your business afloat. It literally comes back to that. Nobody's getting rich by doing these tournaments. Nobody's getting rich by playing these games. You're trying to stop the bleeding. The bleeding is the revenues that you're not going to get because of not having fans in the stands, potentially giving back sponsorship dollars, et cetera, et cetera. You're trying to find a way to keep things afloat. There's no guarantees that everybody comes out of this fine from a business perspective. There's no way to guarantee that, and I think it's naive to think that. So that's why it's happening. That's why you're trying to get these things done. You're trying to do them as safely as possible. You have to do them as safely as possible, or you can't do them. And there's not a blueprint on how to do that. And you're following what the CDC is telling you. You're following what the World Health Organization is telling you. You're following what your experts are telling you to do. And they're learning new things every day. And things change. And this is where you're at. There's a lot of questions for me on the testing side more than anything. And this process, this testing situation has me more worried about schools opening in the fall. It has me more worried about any business that is going to require testing, because how much can you believe in it when we see this happen? I don't know. And it's something that has to be sorted out. It has to become a priority to make sure we have accurate testing.
The PGA Tour is having questions right now with golfers who are coming to tournaments, then they test positive, they withdraw, then their next 3 or 4 or 5 tests, they come up with a negative test. And so the PGA Tour is having to go through all of this stuff right now. And it happened at the tournament that they had a couple weeks ago with golfers. And so, I've talked to coaches in the high school ranks when it comes to the season that they would like to have. And they're trying to learn on the fly as best they can. They admit that at times they're scared because of everything that's in front of them, because they're trying to do the best for themselves, their families, and there are coaches, and this is a universal thing. There are coaches who have young families, and they're having to interact with all of these athletes and then come home at the end of the day. One coach I talked to yesterday, he's got a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. What he does, he interacts with 140 kids at practice and weight rooms. He comes home, first thing he does is hop in the shower. Yeah. Because he's trying to make sure that he can be as healthy and as safe around his family as he can. And he's learning more in the day-to-day about, okay, what works today? All right, this worked yesterday. Is it going to work today? Is it going to work tomorrow? And you continue to develop this body of evidence the entire time, and that body of evidence changes. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that you have to take what you've learned in the past and just have it as a part of this big file that you have going forward. Stuff that you can rely on for information's sake. It may not be stuff that you can rely on for implementation in your day-to-day, but it's all about taking these pieces and learning and going forward. And this is across the board. And to your point, specifically, the number one point when it comes to school in the fall, cost. Cost for testing, not just for student athletes, but for students. When you walk in the door and you want to learn, we're seeing more and more virtual learning is being put on the books. We may hear that the Ivy League may switch their fall sports to spring. They're going to do virtual learning. You're still going to have to pay $43,000 to go to Harvard, but it's going to be virtual learning to go to Harvard and pay $43,000. So all of this information is just, here's today's chapter. This is the information from today. Close that chapter, start it again tomorrow. But it's all about the information that you're building in all of these different cases.
Yeah, and you have to remember the timeline for everything, too. This tournament, when it was being created, it was in a different world with this in this country. And then when it was modified and fully agreed upon, things were different from how it originally started. And now things are different from when it was agreed upon. And it wasn't that long ago. Yeah. But that's how fast these things are moving. You talk about the schools. there's no way the schools can properly test everybody in general, because where's the money going to come from when you're already seeing budgets cut?
Yep.
And just the practicality of it, you can't control what the students do when they leave. You can't control what the students do at home and what their life is at home. They're not professional athletes who are expected to, follow the protocols their team is giving them about what they need to do at home. These are kids, and you can test them every day, and they're probably going to go out and play in the neighborhood and do whatever, and they could get exposed to it, and nothing you can do about it.
Give you another example real quick before you go on. There's another school, and this the particular head football coach of this one school hasn't seen his kids since March, because a majority of his kids have parents who are tied to the local hospital as nurses' assistants, and they're also corrections officers at a nearby prison. So with that activity that the parents have, and those parents coming home, hanging out with their kids when the kids aren't in school, then the coach doesn't even want to run the risk of having those families with those kids integrating with everyone else. Right now, he's just talking to his kids on a daily basis, but they're not integrating because of these kinds of things that are all associated with daily life.
Yeah, there's so many different layers to all of this, and it's really situations without answers, without clear ways forward, and that's a tough spot for anybody who is trying to move things forward. If you're in education, that's what you do. You're trying to learn and progress every day and develop students, and you can't do that safely right now. You don't know how you can do that safely is the more frustrating element. This is all going to be a challenge across the board. A professional sports league has resources that a local school district does not. They can do testing. That's why you see also like governmental agencies doing a level of testing that a local retail store can't do, because you have resources. If you have the resources, if you can test, if people can modify their individual behaviors, okay, you can function in this world. But as we've said in sports, that doesn't mean every league can do it. As we've seen in Scotland, they don't have the financials to do it. They just don't have the money. Right. And they've had to wait until they get a new TV deal to be able to set a schedule to start August 1st. The lower divisions, they're not getting that kind of TV money. They can't afford to come back at the same time as everybody else. I really believe that League One and League Two in England are not going to start at the same time as the Premier League and the Championship. I don't know how they can mandate that financially. I don't think the money is going to be there. And I don't think they can make it happen unless they find some money, or the Premier League gets really generous and throws a lot of money down the pyramid so that testing can be done. Because otherwise, the financials don't add up. You can't do it. And that's going to be the same in college. You're going to see Division I schools who can't afford to play football this year. And then what is the trickle down of that? You're going to see other programs cut because they don't have that revenue from football coming in. Yep. This isn't going away. And this is the long term. This is why people are talking about playing football in the first place. This is why major schools are trying to find a way to play football. Because, yes, they'd like to bring in that revenue. They'd like to keep as much revenue as they can from their TV deals. But you're also looking at football funding tennis, softball, swimming, diving, soccer, all of it. You need it. And if it's not there, it's not just football that's going to suffer. And that's the problem. Now, my complaint about major college football is you don't have a commissioner. You don't have one person making these decisions. And you have too many people not acting out of safety. And this is the big difference here for me.
Yep. Yeah.
You compare the testing and the procedures that MLS, MLB, NBA, WNBA, NWSL have created, and you compare it to major college programs that have the money to do those things who are not.
It's the Wild West.
Yeah, because there's nobody telling them you have to do it this way. There isn't a commissioner telling them this is what you have to do to be able to participate. So you have major universities say, we don't have to test when students come back. When athletes come back, we don't have to test. And you have others say, well, we'll test once, and then we'll test if there's symptoms, and it's all over the map. But none of this is going away anytime soon. And that's just something that is scary, and I hate. And as I talk to people about how this stuff is going to look in the fall, I don't know. I talked to an old friend last night who's involved in youth soccer, and it's just, what does it look like in the fall? I don't know, because I'll say the same thing I said, I want to say a month or two ago, about if I was a coach, I would not just have a mask on to protect others from me. I would have a face shield on. I would have gloves on. I would have long sleeves on. I would be doing everything possible to protect myself from the kids who might have it, might not know they have it, and like you mentioned, parents who have jobs that put the kids at risk, and there's nothing anybody can do about that. But I don't know all those situations. So, yeah, I would be coaching with a hazmat suit on, essentially. Because that's the only way I could guarantee that I'd be okay and be able to come back and coach the next day.
Yeah.
That's the scary thing about it. And Joe Johnstone's on Twitch, and Joe's a teacher. And he said that's what you mentioned. That's what he plans on doing when he gets home from school every day. Shower immediately if they make him go back to school. They're supposed to, like Joe said, they're supposed to have all the PPE. They're supposed to have all the precautionary supplies. They're supposed to have everything prepared with distancing and all those kinds of things. And they're cutting the budget by 14%.
Yeah.
How? And that's the problem, is when you go long term and you look at this, how are you going to make up that 14%? I don't know anytime soon, because everybody's taking hits on this. How do you protect that tennis team at an SEC school from not being cut because of losses from football? I don't have an answer. There's not an easy answer. It's paid for by a program that you need to be operating at full capacity, and you're not going to be able to operate at full capacity.
Yeah, Boise cut baseball, swimming, and diving the other day.
A bunch of schools have cut a bunch. Tennis, I think, is the one that's been hit the hardest across D1. But that's before you have this hit. That's before Boise has a season where they're not going to have a full stadium for their home games, which you would expect will be the case now. So it's not just an MLS thing. It's not just an NWSL thing when they had their problem with Orlando. It's not just a soccer thing. It's not just a sports thing. It's a problem across everything. And it's very difficult to find the answers, and it's very difficult to find the way forward. And I really don't think at this point pointing the fingers at protocols from a sports league and trying to blame it on an outbreak in Orlando, which we know is not the case. It's counterproductive.
Yeah.
In MLS, if I'm the forensic scientist here trying to figure out how this all happened, I'm going back to Dallas and asking questions about their testing. I'm interviewing the players remotely, but I'm interviewing them about what they did in the week before they came to Orlando. I'm doing the same in Nashville, and I'm comparing the testing procedures between what happened in Orlando, and I'm trying to find out, because you are planning to play more games this season because you need to from a business perspective. But the problems that Dallas and Nashville had don't go away if they don't play in the MLS's back tournament, because you're planning on playing games in markets. And you have to ask questions about the testing that they did that was supposedly clearing them and obviously didn't. You've got a lot to figure out. And, oh, yeah, by the way, now do a tournament and adjust it with one team and maybe a second. that you're going to have to make changes to scheduling. You're going to have to find a format. You're going to have to do these things to make everything work. And you have to stay vigilant on everything you're doing in Orlando to begin with, which is stressful.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. And you're doing all this while facing pay cuts, while facing revenue drop, while facing these challenges of keeping things growing, which is where MLS has been. None of this is easy. It's not making excuses. It's the reality of the world we're in right now. And I don't know. I don't know what the answers are. I know that at this point, if put whatever fill in the blank you want here in sports, if unnamed league here doesn't play this season, you will see a catastrophic change to how that league functions going forward, if they function going forward. Yep. There's no way around that. Like, that's a reality. Even the NFL, let's say they don't play, or let's say they play every game behind closed doors and they keep their TV money. Let's go with that, because that's probably the most likely scenario. Because the NFL, when you get down to the real details of the NFL and how important they are in sports, you've got broadcast networks that might go under if they don't play. Like, you've got broadcast networks that 40% of their revenue is tied to pro football games, because it's the number one driver of TV ratings. It's the number one driver of advertising dollars. You don't have that. You have major broadcast networks that I don't know how they function.
Yep.
I don't know how they stay on the air. You got cable networks that are tied into this that they're going to take a huge hit. You combine that with the potential for college football issues, and you've got a catastrophic change, not just to the NFL and football as a whole, but to broadcast, to cable, to advertisers, all of it. And that's as big of a league as you're going to find. You know? Like, put whatever league you want in that box. That's what everybody in sports is afraid of. And that's what you're trying to avoid. And there's just no way to sweep that under the rug. That doesn't mean you act recklessly, because I don't think anybody outside of D1 schools that are not doing proper testing have been acting recklessly during this. Those people are acting recklessly. I have a severe problem with it.
Yep.
Because they're not testing. They're not doing the proper testing. They're just not doing the things that we know you have to do at a minimum. The other leagues are trying to do things in the way that is being recommended, that is, best practices, that should be as safe as possible, and it still might not be. And that's the part that you have to, I think, come to grips with a little bit, is these leagues can do all of these things, and you're still going to have a Dallas situation. You got to find out why, but even if you do everything right, it can still happen because of things outside of your control.
Yep. We got folks in the timeline that have stuff. You want to get into that?
Let's get into stuff.
Okay. Ricky Ricardo, who's been very busy over the last 18 hours or so.
What's up, Ricky?
He says he's listening to Extra Time, and I love the conversation of LAFC being interesting without Vela, and how their two DPs don't have to have the pressure to get it to their star player, but that this team can play freely and could still be a favorite. I don't get it, guys. And then with the red, angry-faced emoji.
I don't get it either. I mean, I don't know. Like I've said about Atlanta United coming into this tournament, do I think they can replace Joseph and still find goals? Yeah, but it's a huge question, and there's no denying it. You can't say that missing Carlos Vela is, it's fine, everything will be fine. They're fine. No, it's the same thing. They have the talent. You have Diego Rossi, you have Brian Rodriguez who can play out wide, you have Adama Diamande, you have Bradley Wright Phillips who can play as the 9. You've got the midfield. You have talent. It's the exact same situation, because Carlos Vela and Joseph Martinez are the focal points of their teams. You miss them, and you have to answer the question of how you replace them. There's no way around it. Both teams have the talent to do it, but you don't know until you see it because it's going to be a different personality on the field. They're in the same boat. And both of them both of them, it will be interesting to see them. Both of them do have the talent to replace that player. But both of them have the same questions about, I'll believe it when I see it. And that's where it is, because it's the same situation.
Joe Johnstone in on the Twitter side of things.
Joe, you're bouncing back and forth.
He's giving us both work. Theoretically, what number or percentage of teams or players would need to be withdrawn from MLS's back for them to actually take the hit and cancel the whole thing after putting so much money and time into its creation?
I don't know. I don't think there's a metric on it, to be honest. I mean, the team side and the scheduling side's the most complicated. And that happens when a team has multiple, not two. I think when you're getting into the levels that Dallas and Nashville have had, and nobody's been near that, it's a question. I think if you have two players who are out for a period of time after testing positive, okay. Now, I don't think it's tied to metrics. I think the problem would be if you have teams now that have went through all the testing, have come into the bubble, have been there for over a week, and then they start to have positives.
Yeah.
That's where you have a problem. That's where you have an issue. When you get outside of that incubation period and then you have positives within a team and have what's happened with Nashville, et cetera, and Dallas. That's where you have the problem. And that's where I think you have to make decisions. I think it's, and I know Joe's not doing that because we've talked to Joe about this a lot, but the money they've spent on the tournament, I don't think it makes them push forward when it's not safe. I don't think it honestly factors into the decision making. It's real in that they don't want to get rid of the tournament over nothing, and they're not going to because they have invested a lot into it. But I don't think they're going to push forward if it's not safe or if you have an outbreak that is not tied to teams coming from their markets.
Right.
They won't push forward with it. They can't. You can't do that. That's where I think it comes down to. I don't think it's as much about a certain number.
Turner Kirby, once the FCD news broke yesterday, has said a couple of things in the timeline. This morning, he says, and it goes back to the discussion we were having yesterday about a particular Twitter account. I'm sure people will take the FCD news and say that's why we need to trust a faceless, nameless insider. I get he or she was right, but until he or she puts some personal credibility on his or her account, he shouldn't be touted as a trusted source.
No, and The Athletic dropped a little nugget in their piece about everything going on that I don't have the wording in front of me. They kind of outed it, saying that it was a player or players who were in the bubble reporting it, which I don't know. The Athletic reporting has had a lot of detail from the player side of the CBA negotiations, so maybe they've got that information from their sources. I don't know. But I'll give you a couple examples. Luis Muzzi of Orlando City, there was a back and forth here about it's went from a lot of different people who cover the league, and it came to Sam Stejskal, who said, also notable that Orlando GM Luis Muzzi appears to be jokingly subtweeting a player, CJ Sapong, and jokingly was in quotes, who previously expressed some of his concerns on Twitter, and then linked to Luis Muzzi's tweet that said, wait, you guys don't know what's really happening in the bubble, showing a picture of Minnesota United doing a header game in the pool. And he said the ball is infected and the water is full of alligators. And Muzzi responded to Stejskal and said, I would never do that to a player at Sam Stejskal, but maybe you should investigate the description of a certain ghost account, in quotes, that only disseminates negativity. It's easy to be anonymous. Now, one of the tweets that the MLS COVID Cup account that is anonymous posted said, "From the bubble," in all caps, "League hired doctors relying on data that suggests a person is no longer contagious 10 days after first positive test. Quotes, protocol, unquote, is that it's safe to return to play/train even if a player is still testing positive." Now, that last part is not protocol, and I don't know if they are insinuating that the protocol that has been published is a lie. I don't know what else they're insinuating, so you have to ask the anonymous account. The protocol that's been disseminated to the public has said that 2 negative tests is what's needed to return to activity. Now, the whole 10 days thing, go look at the CDC. The CDC, and they're talking about that from a non-testing situation. That needs to be understood. If you are, you got to remember when a lot of this started, they did not want me, just your average person. If I had a cough and a fever, they did not want me going to the emergency room. They did not want me going to get a test. I'm fine. I got a cough and a fever. I'm okay. I don't need to go to the emergency room in terms of my health is severely compromised. They didn't want me to go, and they didn't want me to go get tested. What did they tell you? Stay home, self-isolate, quarantine yourself, etc. Now, they've still continued with those different tracks. If you're being tested, it's a different conversation because you're consistently being tested, and the 2 negative tests, you should be cleared. Now, maybe that becomes 3 because of the questions about testing quality. I don't know. Maybe it becomes 4. Who knows? But the 10-day thing is a CDC recommendation if you are not undergoing testing. And it's not about 10 days after the first positive test. It's 10 days after you're not showing symptoms. That's what they've said, because you're not testing. So this is combining multiple things that are not just one. There's insinuation of the protocol not being what's been published, which, from what we know here in Atlanta about the situation you had with a couple players who tested positive, that was not the case. And 2, you're mixing up things from the CDC and reporting something that the CDC is not saying. You're saying the league is doing something that's crazy, and the CDC is recommending it in a different way. It feels manipulative, and maybe it's intentional misinformation. Maybe it is misunderstanding. There's no way to know because it's an anonymous account. Also, remember this with the anonymous account. They've posted stuff that's been proven to be fact. They've also posted stuff that's been proven to be incorrect, and they've deleted a lot of posts that they said things were happening, and then it didn't happen, and then it got deleted. That's what you can do with an anonymous account. But as we've talked about, experts, leading voices have started using this anonymous account as a source. And that's problematic. It's problematic because of some of the posts that they have already made at the beginning of this that are very misleading. Mm-hmm. The Omar Gonzalez post, for example, posting something that was attributed to him and he was not there. Stuff like that. It's just, look, if it is a group of players who are doing this to try to point out things that they are not comfortable with, be clear about it. Be clear about it. And if you don't want to put names to it, look, if that's the case, I understand that. But if you want it to be trusted, it's got to act more responsibly. And that's been my issue with it. This is a very misleading tweet that was posted last night. The CDC thing about 10 days, that's a CDC recommendation, but it's not tied to testing. And there's nothing that has indicated that MLS is saying it's okay to return to play and train, even if you're testing positive. There has been zero to go on that is saying that they're allowing positive testing players or staff to return to activity. Zero. It doesn't fit with anything going on. So I don't know. There's been enough tweets from this account that have been incorrect and something like this that it feels manipulative. And I don't know how you fix that. I don't know.
Chris Ashley this morning on the Twitter side of things, he's home with the kiddo today and has a picture of him watching us on Twitch on his Echo Show in the kitchen.
I apologize to the kid. Sorry, kid.
Why are you
I don't want the kid to watch us. I mean, we're not that entertaining.
Well, Chris is watching it.
No, I appreciate Chris watching us, but I'm apologizing to his kid. Sorry, kiddo.
Yeah, there you go. Shiva, once again, with a testing question in regards to it. How are the EPL or Bundesliga doing it? Are they testing every other day?
Nope. They're testing twice a week. Different conversation, though. And look, when MLS announced they were testing every other day, that was the most intense testing that we had seen anywhere in the world. Probably needed because of the issues in the U.S. versus the issues in the U.K. or Germany. Italy's not testing every other day. And now you've seen the NBA and Major League Baseball plan to test every other day. Now, Major League Baseball Sporting News has an article that has just been posted saying Major League Baseball players were promised they'd be tested for the coronavirus every other day. That's not happening. They also just did their first round of testing to come back.
Yeah.
So they haven't – I think some teams have had 1 session, 2 sessions.
2 max.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know where the breakdown is on that. Major League Baseball is a whole other world of its own. But they're not getting the results back quick enough. That's their biggest problem right now. That's a bigger problem than this at the moment, is they tested on Friday, and you've got teams that didn't get results back yesterday. So you can't function that way.
Yeah.
You know, what we've seen in MLS, at least in Atlanta, because that's what we can speak to the best, you had a positive test on a Wednesday, you had a follow-up test on a Thursday, and you announced that a player tested positive late in the day on Thursday, around dinner time. On Friday, you had another player test positive, and on Saturday, they had a follow-up test, and you reported that it was a second positive fairly early in the day, I think mid-afternoon on the Saturday. So you're getting the results back pretty quick on those situations. Don't know what Dallas was doing testing-wise. Don't know what Nashville was doing. It seems like it was on the individual teams in their individual markets. Now, in Major League Baseball, they were doing the testing and everything was going to one lab. That's the way it's being done in Major League Baseball right now, and it doesn't seem like that lab can process the results fast enough.
Yeah.
But I in terms of the Bundesliga and Premier League and La Liga and Serie A, twice a week, and they haven't had any problems yet.
Jordan Myers, back to the previous conversation, that super inflammatory from the bubble account isn't helping. I think if people gave less credibility to an anonymous account, spent more time reading the releases, they wouldn't be as panicked.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know why that account, other than just the fact it's inflammatory, got so much attention. I don't know. If people know more about who it is, and look, The Athletic pretty much said it's a group of players behind the scenes. They dropped that in their article, their last one. If that's it, then that's it. Then, I guess they know who's doing it, so they give it credibility and they believe it. But I'm going from what's been posted, and there's been enough things out there that are problematic with what's been tweeted and what's been posted and what's been insinuated. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what else to do about that element of it. It really feels like, and I do not understand why, because I look at the conversation, it can be from the same people about the NWSL and how they handled the situation with the Orlando Pride and the reaction to that versus the MLS situation. And it feels like it's two different things we're talking about. And it just feels completely different in the way people are looking at the two. And it's not fair, in my opinion. I don't know why that is. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't know. But yeah, the unnamed or unattributed, maybe it's a better way to put it, Twitter account that is, at the heart of a lot of this, to the point that you have, team officials mentioning it. I don't know if that's the best way forward to cover these things, but I don't know.
Yeah, Michael Head, I've tried to be positive as I really want to walk to MARTA, tailgate in the Gulch, go to MBS, see my seatmates, watch a win, and go home. With the news yesterday, I feel gloom and doom on the positive. I called and got a refund on the Champions League match. Keep hope alive.
Well, that's a different conversation, too. I mean, I'm with Michael on that. Like, that's a different conversation about being able to go watch a game with fans in the stands. I've been down on that for a while. I want to see how USL handles it. I have concerns because every place is different, and maybe it's okay in some places. El Paso made the decision that it's not okay. El Paso Locomotive was one of 5. Now there's going to be 4 that we're going to have fans in the stands on the first weekend of the USL Championship. Southwest University Park was going to be 25% capacity available. They've changed that for the next 2 games, Saturday and the following Wednesday. They're doing the cutout thing. That's $35. You can have a stand-up image of yourself. Proceeds will benefit COVID-19 relief funds in the El Paso community. The GM and manager of operations, Andrew Forrest, told KFOX 14 in El Paso, "We know we can do this the right way and keep everybody safe, but it just doesn't feel like the right time." I think you're going to see more of that in any area that has any questions, and Atlanta would be an area like that. Atlanta United 2 will not have fans in the stands at their first 2 home matches in USL Championship. They're going to, keep moving forward probably a couple weeks at a time, maybe a month at a time, in making those decisions, which I think is smart. But I don't have a whole lot of hope about August being that different. September, maybe, because it's further away. Get, to October, maybe. When you're talking about MLS, when you're looking at November, December, maybe. There's so much unknown. I mean, you've got people who are saying there will be a second wave. Well, we haven't got out of the first wave yet, so I don't know. There might not be a second wave. It might just be one long wave.
Right.
There's no guarantee of that either. Like, there's no guarantee that there's going to be a second wave because there's also other things being developed. And that's where I'm putting my hope. Michael feeling down about the Champions League. Yeah, I don't know what the Champions League is going to look like because you need to get the leagues back underway first. And CONCACAF needs to figure that out with their Nations League, Champions League, their competitions that are huge financial drivers for all the members of the Confederation. But you look at what the fall could bring, and my hopes are in the therapeutics, beyond the little bit of help for people who are in the worst way with this, the therapeutics that can help people fight it off quicker and not let it progress to be a huge problem. Obviously a vaccine, but that's going to be a longer process, and when it's available, it's probably going to be available to high-risk folks first, because I don't think it's going to be available to the general public day one. Also, the testing. The testing has to be cheaper. It has to be better, because if it's cheaper and it's faster, then that opens up more possibilities for schools to be comfortable, for office spaces, for agencies, for, sports leagues, for everybody who would be doing anything that you can't guarantee social distancing. It would make it safer to do it. These are all questions. If it's cheap and it's safe, if part of your ticket, you have to pay a $15 testing fee to get a quick test that has, accuracy and you can believe in, and that's part of your process of entry, I think people would do it. But is that going to be available in the fall? Who knows? Probably not. Maybe. These are the things that are being talked about that's where my hope is. I hope that you have breakthroughs on these areas, because those are the game changers in changing this. Because, look, I have more hope in those things changing it than the general population changing it right now, and that's pretty sad, but that's where we're at. And Bernd Dursberger makes a really good point. He said, sports is a reflection of the society around it. Last week, at the Formula One race in Austria, they conducted over 4,000 PCR tests. Drivers, team, track staff, hotel workers, anybody involved in the event. 0 positives. In MLS, if you did 4,000 PCR tests of 4,000 different people, you'd have positives. It's not to say MLS is reckless, it's the society around it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the problem is now it's getting to the point that, you know, if you're doing everything right and the recommended way to do it, but you're still trying to live your normal life, the risk is higher. It's higher than it was in May. It's higher than it was at the beginning of this, and that's problematic. That's scary. So, you know, with Michael, in terms of having fans in the stands, I'm not optimistic about that right now. It does make me a little. I hope that can change quickly, because not just from the business perspective, which we've talked about a ton, just for the people. It's you know, it brings a lot of joy to a lot of people to be able to go to a sporting event and enjoy it. It's an escape at a good time, and everybody needs an escape right now at a bad time. So I hope that it becomes available. I think there's still a lot of work to do to get there.
You mentioned game changers. You want me to talk about a game changer for SDH before we keep going back into the timeline?
That was pretty good. Why don't you tell us about that game changer?
Steve Apolinsky, Apolinsky & Associates, LLC. Wrongful death and serious injury attorneys, over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments accrued for their clients in Georgia and Alabama. If you need to have a consultation when it comes to a serious injury wrongful death case in either of those two states, a couple different ways that you can get in touch with Steve Apolinsky & Associates. aa-legal.com is the website. The second that you register that website in the URL bar, pop up window. You can have a live chat with somebody 24/7, 365. If they're wearing khakis, aa-legal.com. Also, shoot Steve an email directly at deb@aa-legal.com. Give them a get a free consultation. 779 recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine, top 100 firms in the state. Wrongful death and serious injury matters. It's Apolinsky & Associates. The website is aa-legal.com.
Your bandwidth really did not want to cooperate this morning.
Of course not.
That didn't make any sense. It was a lot lower than usual.
It's weird.
Back this out. I don't know.
Yep.
I'm going to have to maybe play the music where you don't hear it.
That could be.
That's not as much fun, but I think that's what we're going to have to do.
Yeah, well, I can hear it. I can still hear it a little bit. Tafka. The how question, which is what people who recognize the bubble as fine and soccer can be played, is completely overshadowed by the trigger-happy reporting that it should, quote, just all be shut down. They're skipping that issue entirely.
Yeah, there's a large group, because it's not a small group. There's a large group in the soccer Twitter sphere in this country. We'll put it that way, because it's a broad collection of everybody involved. I mean, whether you're a fan, whether you're media, whether you are a podcaster, a blogger, a writer, an influencer, whatever. There's a large group that is against anything, nothing. They shouldn't play. Period. And that's there. I don't think there's any way to convince that. What's been weird to me is that a lot of that group has also been enjoying the NWSL Challenge Cup, as they should. But those two things don't necessarily go together, because the reaction wasn't the same way about it. I'm glad it wasn't. I'm glad the NWSL has been able to add sponsors during this. I'm glad they've been able to get more exposure than maybe they've ever had during this. That's amazing. But MLS trying to do a similar thing has been this horrible thing. And there hasn't been much talk about USL.
Yeah.
And USL's doing it in a different way than the other two. And USL is trying to come back again, as we've said, all of them are trying to come back for the business implications. They're trying to protect their business. Period. There's just no other way around it. Yep. They're trying to do it safely, but they're trying to protect their business. And they're all going about it different ways, and the reactions are very different to all of them, and I just don't get it. And I don't know if there's any convincing where people's heels are dug in on this. I just don't think there is, and I don't know why that's the case.
I know that Ricky gave us his predictions for group survivors and advancers into the knockout stage yesterday, and I know that we do have juice box numbers. I guess we can get into that tomorrow morning as well. But he wants to know, what are the schedule changes with Dallas out of the tournament?
Don't know yet. That's what I'm waiting to see. And I'm trying to connect the dots. I would say that there is probably the likelihood that a decision is being made on Nashville, because if you're going to redo a schedule or at least modify it one way or another, you don't want to do it and then have to do it again.
Yeah.
And Nashville seems to be a team that is at risk. And I don't know if Nashville pulling out would make the whole tournament difficult to do. I don't know if it would mean you can't do it. I don't know what it would mean. I don't think it would. Going from Grant Wall's tweet, I don't think it would. I think the other teams are committed to doing it. Teams traveled to Orlando yesterday knowing what was going on with Dallas, because that wasn't a snap decision. A lot of people, threw Garber and the league under the bus, saying, well, it took 5 days to make the decision. Well, you had a lot of things you had to confirm, and you also needed to see if these players who tested negative in Dallas and then tested positive in Orlando, if you were going to start to get negative tests from them. You didn't know where they were in terms of the virus. Like, there's no way to know. So you wanted to give it time because you didn't want to have them withdraw. There was even talk floated about, North Texas SC of USL League One and players from that team coming in to fill some of the gaps. That didn't happen. They tried to find a way forward. They couldn't find it. They made the decision they made. We'll see with Nashville. I think you're up against it. You're going to have to make that decision today. And I would assume that when that decision is made, that's when we'll get an update to the schedule. Because you've got to get the teams that were in Dallas's group 3 games. You've got to get the teams that were supposed to play Nashville, if they don't participate, you got to get them 3 games.
Yeah.
That one might be a little bit easier. Maybe. I don't know. I'd have to run through schedule permutations. I don't know. But I think you want to announce all of that at once, so they're probably waiting on the Nashville situation.
Yeah, Tafka's saying if Nashville's yanked, his suggestion is putting Chicago in Group B, then you have an even 24 across 6 groups.
Yeah, and you could, and that would be the easy thing, and just redo the schedule that way. That would be fine. And if that means Chicago has to play in the West this season because that's the thought process for it, maybe you can make that work. Maybe your schedule is more uneven than it was going to be to begin with in terms of games versus East-West and that kind of stuff. You're just trying to get the games played right now. You're trying to get games played. You're trying to get as competitively balanced of a competition as you possibly can. And it's not going to be easy to do, but that's where you're at.
Chris Hutchison linking to a David Gura tweet from a new Goldman Sachs research note. There are 6 states that still meet none of the federal government's recommended gating criteria for reopening. Several others only meet one. Those 6 states: Arizona, Florida, South Carolina, Mississippi, Georgia, and Nevada.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot of issues at the federal level about how this has been handled, and it's trickled down to a lot of states.
Yep.
And there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of confusion. And just like we mentioned with the college conferences where there's not one person taking the lead on this, you can take that to the national response to this, and it's the same thing.
Yep. Everybody's
trying to figure it out as they can. And it's very difficult to do so with all the information changing on a regular basis. That's not to throw scientists under the bus, not to throw doctors under the bus. It's a difficult situation. But in difficult situations, you need leadership, you need consistency, and we're not getting any of that either. So it's making a difficult situation more difficult.
Yeah,
and that's
Chris,
what we don't need.
Yeah, Chris says it doesn't look good now, unlikely to look much better this fall. Jason Nix is in this morning at Red Dragon ATL. So frustrated and nervous about hashtag MLS is back right now, a day before the first MLS action in months, and we're not even talking about soccer, not blaming MLS, just with other leagues going more smoothly. I hoped for better.
Well, I think when you compare other leagues to MLS, you can't because of the country. The countries are so different that it's not a direct comparison between Bundesliga, Premier League, La Liga, Serie A, others to MLS. All the leagues here have had problems. That's the part you have to look at. The NWSL's been back first. They lost the team. They didn't get to have the Orlando Pride as part of it. But since then, they've been good. And their protocols are not quite as stringent as MLS's protocols. And they're in a bubble. And they've been able to handle that. The bubble, where the bubble is, doesn't make much of a difference because it's a bubble. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
The NWSL's gotten back. MLS is trying to. I mean, you got a game on the schedule for tomorrow. Major League Baseball, they're finding it difficult. Before the labor issues,
yeah,
you had that first, and now you've got the testing issues. The testing issues, that's the number one thing that I'm concerned about with everything in American sports. Testing being available and testing being accurate and
yes.
testing being done quickly enough. All of that is vital for sports to happen. Beyond anything else, all of that is vital. And there's questions about that now. There's questions about it from Dallas, from Nashville. There's questions about it in Major League Baseball with teams not getting results in 3 days. That there's going to be questions in the NFL about it, and we're waiting to see what the NFL's testing procedures are going to be. If there's any league that can do this privately and get things done at whatever level they want to do it, it's the National Football League.
Yep.
And they've got a lot of reasons to do it, and they've got a lot of people who will be willing to help them get it done, because not just sports ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different ecosystems are dependent on the NFL happening this year, and they can test every day, and they can pay for whatever level of testing they need to pay for to get results back as fast as possible. And they probably will, because of how vital it is. The others are in different situations, and we're finding the testing to be the biggest issue. It's not the protocols, it's not the bubbles, it is testing. Testing is the number one issue right now with sports in this country.
Bartimus Prime, the numbers came out from Caesars last night, and LAFC, I believe, was at plus 450 to win MLS's back. Atlanta United, I think, was second at 7-1. Okay. So Bart asks, is this the first time Atlanta United has entered an MLS competition as an underdog? Seems like everyone loves two teams in Group E with more questions than Atlanta, even hyping up Cincinnati, hashtag we are more than Joseph.
I don't think it's the first time they've come into a competition as an underdog. And leave CONCACAF out of it. I'm trying to remember last year if they were the prohibitive favorite. They were among the favorites. I think they're among the favorites in this. Matt Doyle excluded. He didn't see it that way. But again, I think maybe there was a little bit of gimmick work there going on about keeping up an identity. 7-1. I mean, I don't know how many other teams have better odds. One? Just one? Yeah. Then they're a favorite. What's Sporting Kansas City? Because I might need to find a way to talk to a juice box purveyor about this one, because I think Sporting Kansas City is the best position to win this thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that because Adam from 816 joined us on Twitch.
I'm warning you.
I said it on the Chase Thomas podcast. I've said it consistently. I think they're the best position to win this. They don't have a Carlos Vela question. They don't have a Joseph Martinez question. I'm with Bart. I think Atlanta can answer it. I think LAFC can answer it. but I don't know if you're as good without that key player. And I think Sporting is balanced. And now Sporting's missing Felipe Gutierrez, different level of question, but I think they have an easier replacement with Gianluca Busio, who's got the experience to be able to step up. He's got to step up. Just like for Atlanta, if Pity Martinez is up top, he's got to step up. For LAFC, Adama Diamande, Brian Rodriguez have to step up. But I think Sporting has more to support that stepping up than the other two favorites in LA and Atlanta.
Okay. William Hill is a little different. LAFC is at plus 450. NYCFC and Seattle are at plus 800.
Okay. And they're in the mix. I mean, NYC, question about a new manager, question about a little bit of a slow start, but NYCFC has more roster continuity than any team in the league. Seattle's your defending champs. There's not really any major concerns at the moment with the Seattle Sounders. I don't think they were the best team in the league last year, but they won the title. I don't think they're the best team in the league coming into this year and in the two games and coming into this. I don't think they're the best team, but they won. And Brian Schmetzer has shown an ability to really succeed in playoff type of competition. We'll see if that translates to this kind of tournament format. They're one of the favorites.
They are, according to our friends at Odds Shark. LAFC is at plus 500, Seattle plus 800, Atlanta United plus 900. So at Odds Shark, they're third in the barn. You wanted to know about Sporting Kansas City.
Mm-hmm.
3, 6, 9. They are number 10 at plus 2,000 with LA Galaxy.
Which one is this?
Odds Shark.
What do I have to do to find some juice boxes for that one? We'll talk about it off air because that's really good. That's a really good number.
Finishing up your top 10, NYCFC's plus 1,000, Toronto FC plus 1,400, Minnesota United plus 1,600, along with Red Bulls in Philadelphia. Galaxy and Sporting are at plus 2,000. That's your top 10.
Really good number.
Nashville, by the way, is at plus 10,000.
Yeah, that's not. I don't care about that number. They might not even be playing in the tournament as we find out. Adam from 816 says Brian Rodriguez of LAFC needs to live up to the hype. He does.
Yeah, he does.
He does. I mean, he has looked really good outside of LAFC. He's looked like he's trying too hard with LAFC.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll change. You'd hope it would as he gets a little bit older. He's got the ability. There's no question about that. But the performances do have to be better. And Bob Bradley needs to put him in a position here where he's not asking him to be Carlos Vela. He's asking him to be Brian Rodriguez and contribute to a balanced team, not replace the league MVP. And if Rodriguez can get that mindset down, I think he'll be fine. He's got the ability. I love him as a player. But yeah, he's got to produce more in the black and gold.
Yep, we do have initial numbers for the matches for tomorrow night. We will leave that for tomorrow. Yep. And I have asked Ricky Ricardo to resubmit because he said his predictions have changed.
Yeah, well, wait until we get everything. He can submit it tomorrow. Ricky, submit it in the morning. Adam from 816 will be doing our group picks tomorrow because I got a feeling the groups are going to look a little different. So we'll dig into all of that on tomorrow's show in detail. But yeah, I might need to go talk to Odd Shark and find some people with that 2,000 to 1 plus 2,000 odd, not 2,000 to 1 plus 2,000 odds.
Joe Johnstone says that we forgot a rather important anniversary that's today.
You're saying that like we're bad people. What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know. Just that.
No, you're saying that like we're bad people.
No, I'm reading what Joe Johnston says.
No, you read it in a certain way to imply
he says,
we're bad people.
He goes, this is direct quote. We forgot a rather important anniversary that's today, then 4 ellipses afterwards.
Okay. That's better because that's not dripping with accusation. Go ahead.
Atlanta is united, July 7, 2015. I believe that we're at 5 years to the name, correct?
Yeah. I don't know how important of an anniversary that is, Joe. It's
nice,
cool.
He's got a nice photo of his poster from that date.
Yeah, it's cool. the more important anniversary is the day the club was announced. That's the one I look at. I don't look at the naming one as important.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about the day that the NWO was formed, which was 24 years ago today.
I should have known.
We're almost to the silver anniversary of the creation of the New World Order.
I should have known.
What a plonker.
I am not.
Mm-hmm.
For bringing up one of the best plot line and gimmicks in the history of professional wrestling, I'm a plonka.
Yeah, because it went from one of the best to one of the worst in like 6 weeks.
Bad. Well, when they split up and when NWO Red and NWO
No,
Black.
when they had 500 billion different people in it, and they just started handing out shirts like they were candy.
Scott Norton, Buff Bagwell, Virgil.
I was in the NWO for an episode, okay? It was ridiculous.
Tafka says, sadly, back to the soccer, Tafka says, sadly, there are many in media that also seem to be in the shut it down camp.
Yeah, and I don't get it because they weren't that way about the NWSL. And it's not saying that they should be that way about the NWSL. I think the NWSL shows you that you can adapt and still have a competition that can work, and you can still make it happen. But no, they weren't that way about it. I did not see. Trying to remember. I mean, I'm sure there were some questions on if they would be able to play. I did not see any campaigning for the NWSL Challenge Cup to be shut down because of the Orlando Pride situation.
Yeah, I didn't either.
And I feel like we're getting to the campaigning point here with some folks. And I mean, I get it. I understand the trepidation, but the situation's the same. It's just in different places. The bubble is not the issue. Orlando is not the issue. And I see so many people who are pointing to they shouldn't do this competition because it's in Orlando. There's been no problem with it being in Orlando. That has not led to anything from Dallas or Nashville. Dallas and Nashville affected Dallas and Nashville.
Yeah.
And what their markets are going through and where the players live and what they do when they leave the training ground in their markets is what would affect that, not Orlando. That's not the way it went down. So that's known. Like that's the thing, is that's not supposition, like, because you didn't have some other team. You didn't have Nashville catch it from Dallas. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Like, the bubble didn't cause
that.
Yeah,
the bubble is not the issue here.
No.
Everything leading into their depositing themselves into the bubble is what needs to be looked at. What were the protocols? What was the testing? How was it handled in the individual markets for Dallas and for Nashville leading into their travel pattern to come into the bubble?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of folks are, I've seen folks conflating the notion that the bubble is the issue and that's what caused what happened with Dallas and Nashville, and that's not that is not the issue here. The bubble is not the issue.
It does not look like the bubble is causing these problems. It's pretty apparent that Dallas had positive tests upon arriving to the bubble, and then it spread. And Nashville had positive tests upon arriving, and it spread. And Nashville had questions before leaving Nashville.
Yeah,
their arrival was delayed due to inconclusive / presumptive positive tests, and those details need to come out. Like that's where my questions are about the competition. It's not about the competition. It's not about the bubble. It's about what was the process for each team to come in, and why did 2 have a problem? Why did 2 have this problem where they arrived with tests, positive testing once they arrived? Because we've seen other teams, even other teams that had question marks coming in, that had delayed arrivals, tested fine and came in and were fine to come in. So I don't know. I don't know what happened with Dallas and Nashville.
Tom Russo, the Airborne DJ, is in this morning, and he says, come on, at Longshoe, you know we have no shot, referring to Atlanta United. Just ask the clowns at Extra Time. Sans Joseph, we should not even bother playing if you ask them.
Yep, that's what I heard. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't think Atlanta's the favorite. I think it's a little crazy to think that they'd be the favorite, missing their goal scorer, Joseph Martinez.
Yeah.
Are they among the favorites? Yeah, I think they have one of the most talented rosters.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to look different without Joseph Martinez. Yeah. Do I think LAFC is the favorite? No, because they don't have Carlos Vela. He is going to stay at home with his wife, who is pregnant. And there was some hints about some problems with the pregnancy. And look, I get that. Nobody is questioning Carlos Vela staying at home for that reason. But not having him in a black and gold uniform in Orlando, that changes how we look at LAFC. It's the same conversation. They have players who can replace him. They have players who can step up. But you have to ask it because he's not there. You're missing the MVP from 2019 from LAFC, and you're missing the MVP from the previous year for Atlanta United. Big players on big teams, you're missing them. They have the talent to replace them, but what is that going to look like?
Yeah.
You can't put them as the favorites coming in my opinion, because of that. I don't think there is one clear-cut favorite. I think in the West, LAFC, I think Seattle, I think Sporting Kansas City, and that's my pick to win the thing. In the East, Atlanta, Toronto, New York City, the usual suspects. And Columbus is right there. Columbus has to step up this year, but man, they have the talent to do it. I think they are right there in that conversation. I think Philadelphia is right there in that conversation. I want to see Philadelphia for an extended period of time without Harris Medunjanin, because that's going to change the way that they play. I want to see more than the 2 games we saw. So you could put, just like coming into the season, where it felt like there were about 8 to 10 teams that could win MLS Cup. That's the same conversation we're having about this.
Andrew Buccellato at A2Booch on Twitter. A, capital A, the number 2, and then Booch, B-O-O-C-H, says saying United is the favorite again wouldn't get any reads or clicks.
I don't know about that. That's the narrative that I think MLS Digital goes with a lot of times. They want to say sometimes what gets clicks rather than what they feel is accurate. I get that impression a little bit with some of it. And look, I understand that. But I think they'd get clicks if they said Atlanta was a favorite. I don't think Atlanta is the favorite. I don't think you can say that without Joseph.
I think that they are a contender to win it, I guess is probably how I would phrase it.
It's the same thing as saying a favorite. I mean, it's the same thing as what I've said. Like
they're not the favorite. They are a favorite.
I don't think there is a favorite. One favorite. There's not. Let's put it. There's not the favorite.
Right.
There are 8 to 10 teams that can win this, and Atlanta's one of them, even without Joseph. LAFC is one of them, even without Carlos Vela. But I don't think there is one set of separate from everybody else.
Mr. Green, the 919 Falcoholic, brings something else to our memory banks today. He says, don't forget about NWO Japan, which ran from 96 to 2000. And he included a photograph.
Okay.
Looks like Scott Norton, Fake Sting, Buff Bagwell, Bischoff, Six, Kevin Nash, and some of the New Japan wrestlers. I did not know about this.
You didn't know about NWO Japan?
Uh-uh.
And you're the wrestling guy around here, John. I'm really disappointed in you.
I'm domestique. I was not a big New Japan guy until the last couple of years.
I mean, I still figured you heard about it.
I knew about it, but
wait. No.
I know about the NWO. I didn't know about NWO Japan.
Okay. Now you know that the whole idea for the gimmick came from a Japanese promotion too, right?
No. I know that Crow Sting was Kevin Nash's idea.
That has nothing to do with this. You're going to have to do some... If you're the wrestling guy, you got to do some research. Very disappointed, John.
Tafka is saying, having had a month to prepare, Atlanta will have an added advantage of not knowing how we'll line up at the top. No film to study, and it may not be the same from match to match. It makes us very dangerous.
It does. It does. I want to make it clear. Atlanta is not the favorite because you're missing the best goal scorer in the league. that's not a crazy idea.
Yeah.
Does it mean they can't win? No, not at all. And it does mean we kind of need to see it a little bit. I think you can play Adam John up top. You can play J.J. Williams up top. You can play Pity Martinez up top. Frank de Boer mentioned it in his media availability. He looks at Manuel Castro as a player who can play up top in this scenario as well. We've seen others say that Mateo Sosetu could go up there. He hasn't played there, but does his skill set potentially work there? Yeah. You'd put Barco in that conversation too. I mean, you've got a lot of possibilities. You could also play a different shape where you're looking for something completely different out of the number 9. That extra training time helps a ton. Missing Joseph Martinez means you're not the favorite coming into the tournament. After the group stage, we're going to have a different conversation about this because we're going to see Atlanta in a tournament after coronavirus has stopped training without Joseph Martinez, but we're going to have 3 games to go on. Same for LAFC without Carlos Vela. We're going to have more to go on. But coming in, I don't think there's a clear favorite, but I would pick Sporting Kansas City because I feel like they are the most stable coming in, and I think Peter Vermes is a manager who will do well in this environment.
5 Takes on the 5 Stripes wants to know if there's any update on Eric Lopez. Would it be wise for the club to make another signing when the regular season is still very much up in the air?
That last part doesn't affect it because you're not thinking about Eric Lopez for the regular season necessarily. You're thinking about Eric Lopez for whatever 5-year term you're signing him for. And if you can get him now, you get him now. You don't put it at risk later if he's the guy you want. There's no need to do it tomorrow. There's no need to do it today. I don't know where the process stands. But, I mean, remember, we saw the same thing out of Paraguay earlier this year. Matias Villasanti was a done deal. It was going to happen. He's going to arrive. Never did. Arzamendia, done deal. It's going to happen. He's going to be here tomorrow. Never happened. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. The reporting was different when it came to Eric Lopez, and it sounded very different from the club stance and all the different situations, but it's not done yet, and there's no guarantee it gets done anytime soon, and we'll see what happens. I think he would be a prime candidate for that under-22 initiative going forward, and if that means you sign him and bring him in next year, or you sign him and loan him back to Olympia for the rest of the season, or loan him somewhere else to play, maybe all that's on the table. We'll just have to wait and see. But you're not signing him for this regular season. You're signing him for a probably 5-year deal for him to develop during that period of time, not just one season.
Yeah. Linking back to a story from, and I'm trying to go back and double confirm this. The Fan TV on Insta went to a Footgoal 970 radio station in Paraguay who was saying could come close, and so that's where that was coming from.
Saying what?
That the Lopez signing could come today.
Okay.
So
when was that said?
That's what I'm trying to go back into their timeline and figure this out. So that's where that was coming from.
Do I need to get on this, John? Because this shouldn't be that hard to follow back.
Well, at Footgoal 970 PY, and I'm trying to find an Eric Lopez reference.
Ay, Dios mío.
Yep.
Give me 1 second, and I'll be able to tell you.
Okay.
So, one of his agents, maybe he has multiple, Augusto Paraja, said, I estimate that in 15 to 20 days I could travel to Atlanta. Now they have the papers on Eric Lopez's departure.
Okay.
This is really similar to what we talked about yesterday with the Women's Super League in England, and how a lot of deals are agreed upon or done behind the scenes but can't be finalized until travel issues get worked out, until quarantine issues get worked out. And I do not know what the situation is with travel from Paraguay into the United States right now. So it could be done. It could be you just got to sign the paper. You just got to do the medical here, but you can't do that yet. So with one of his agents saying 15 to 20 days, and Roberto Rojas had some translation on this one, it sounds like it's in process. It's not a rush. It doesn't matter. And this regular season isn't the reason you're getting him. You're getting him for a long term.
Rich Ransom says MLS should have gone to the teams in the States with the lax restrictions and sent a mandate to heavy test and quarantine ASAP. Not sure if that's legal, but it would have prevented the issues of teams coming to the bubble infected and unprepared.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that, look, like we talked about, when this whole thing was being put together, they didn't think they could train and market. Then they thought that they could, and they have been able to in most, but not all. And people wanted to be at home. And then you've had outbreaks happen fairly recently in some of these areas, and you've had to adjust to that part of it. So I don't know if it would have been more on MLS or more on the individual teams. And that's where I keep kind of coming back to is in market, it's on your team, it's on your group. And that's where I think you have to ask questions about what Dallas did differently than others and what Nashville did differently than others and why they're having testing issues where others did not. Those questions need to get answered to have an idea what happened here. I don't know when if we'll get those answers.
All right. Now I know how you found it and got it there a lot faster than I did. So
no, it's just called a search. It's
that's what I was doing.
It's just called searching effectively. You're very slow on your searching, John.
Agreed. I'm caught up on Twitter. What's going on Twitch?
Adam from 816 has New England as a dark horse in the tournament, which I'll agree with. Gustavo Bo, Adam Buska up top give you a lot of firepower. Teal Bunbury, I think, gives you firepower too. I want to see how their defense holds up. That's my question about New England. I think they're in that next tier in the East. I mean, I look at Atlanta, Toronto, New York City above the rest. I look at Columbus and Philadelphia next, and I would put New England, depending on how many tiers you want. If you want to put them at the bottom of the second tier, at the top of the third tier. They're around 6 in terms of power rankings in the East. I think that's about right. I think that's about accurate. But, yeah, they got the thing about a tournament like this, if you get a goal scorer that gets hot, if you get a goalkeeper that gets hot, you can ride that a pretty long way. And New England has the goal-scoring part where they could get hot. Question from Adam, how quickly will northern teams adjust to the heat? I think the ones that got down there a little bit earlier will. And that's maybe part of the conversation. I mean, a San Jose who got there very early, they should be fine with the heat and be comfortable. And teams that got there last minute, maybe they'll have a little bit tougher time. The 5 subs will help because you can plan going in if you know a player is not 100% fit or 100% comfortable with the heat. You're going to play 60 today, or we're going to replace you at the 60-minute mark. So give me 60. Don't try to give me 90 when you can only give me 60 good minutes. Give me 60 good minutes. I think those are the conversations you'll see more early on.
Ricky Ricardo says, did we see the news on Jurgen Locadia?
Yeah, day-to-day. So we will see if he's ready to go game 1 or ready to go game 2 against Atlanta. So day-to-day with a knock, thigh injury is what they're a little worried about. So we'll see where they stand. But probably won't know until Saturday and what their lineup looks like against Columbus in the match after Atlanta and Red Bulls.
And let's see, Tafka has a request from a very long chain. He wants us to set a man right with what he's saying about
I'm not setting people right. That's no fun. What now? What are we getting into?
Okay, so Tafka has isolated a tweet from an individual. Players who test positive are not being isolated. They're not getting room service as per reports I've seen.
I haven't seen that anywhere. They are getting room service. Like that doesn't even make any sense. There was, I believe it was from the COVID Cup Twitter account saying something about players having to go and pick up their food downstairs or something at one point. That has not been confirmed, and that's not a breach of the bubble. That's not good, but it's not the catastrophic thing people are trying to say. What was the not being isolated? That has not been said anywhere. That
Players
I
who
know of.
test positive are not being isolated, not getting room services, poor report says.
I have not seen any of those reports, so
Yeah.
I don't know. It's where you get a lot of misdirection and misunderstanding, because I have not seen anything like that.
Yeah. What else is on your side of the line?
We got stuff about Wigan, if you want to jump into it. The Wigan Rugby League Club is a potential new owner of Wigan Athletic. They issued a statement. They said, having shared a stadium together for many years and with a large number of fans supporting both clubs, we've become friends with many of the management and staff. We know this is a very worrying time for them all. Strongly believe that Wigan Athletic is better being locally owned, as sustainability and ownership of the stadium is equally important to both clubs. We are currently working with our longstanding advisors, KPMG, and talking to external parties. Our intention is to identify other investors quickly and start due diligence on the football club with the intention of making a bid in due course. We've made the administrators aware of our interest and hope to explore this with them further over the days ahead. That'd make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it would.
That would be a very smart move here. I know John Nason is already hoping for that with Coventry.
Yeah.
We'll see. Maybe Wigan Rugby League Club will give us a new blueprint for this sort of scenario.
Yeah, and when we got into the discussion about the Shadow Company A and Shadow Company B, with Shadow Company B being created in the Caymans, the parent company for Coventry City, guess where they were created? The tax haven known as the Cayman Islands.
Again,
yes.
Just because they were created in the Cayman Islands does not mean they are bad. I think that needs to be clarified.
In Sisu's case, they have been ranked in pretty much every poll known to mankind as one of the top 10 worst owners.
You are changing the argument, and that's not what I said. You said because they were made in the Caymans, it's bad. The Caymans is a tax haven.
Yes.
Businesses try to spend as little tax as possible. This is not news.
Yes.
You know, there are plenty of businesses that probably were created in the Caymans that do good work.
Mm-hmm.
So don't say just because they're
I'm
in
just
the Caymans that it's bad.
I'm saying,
That's
I'm
not the
saying
way you
Sisu's
said it.
case.
Anyway, that's
Sisu.
not what you said. That's not what I said. You know what I said. Stop playing this silly game of playing radio. We're not doing that. We don't do that around here, John. Remember?
Right.
That's what we said.
Yes.
Except I'm just a bully around here.
Yes, yes, you are.
Wigan recruitment staff were informed that they're being let go. Several senior casualties, employees on furlough, were told that they will not receive the 20% top-up of the government funding for June. People on furlough in the UK, 80% of their salary was paid by the government. Clubs were paying the other 20% to make them whole. They had promised that with these employees, and now they're not. Well, their ownership pulled out, and they have no money. And that's probably part of the reason. So that's where you're at. Let's see. Steve Bruce had a comment. Lee Ryder at the Chronicle had this. Steve Bruce on Miguel Almiron. He has a manager's dream. He is working hard in training. He's been carrying a thigh injury but doesn't want to tell anybody. In 18 months, he's proved he is a top player. Could have proved that a little bit earlier if you'd put him in the right position, but, just saying that. And I thought he proved that pretty quickly with Rafa Benitez, but, just saying that. I don't know. Anyway. Reuters about Norwich. Good news about Norwich City. Maybe destined for relegation, but they are not under financial pressure to sell their best players if they get relegated. Daniel Fark, the manager, said, the good thing is we're financially solid and don't have pressure to sell.
Yeah.
Because they haven't overextended themselves. They kind of know what they are. They're a club that is right in between the Premier League and the Championship. And they're going to go back and forth a lot because that's the level that they're at. They haven't been promoted and then tried to be something that they're not, that they can't sustain, and then it all falls apart, and then you end up being in a relegation fight in the Championship. That's smart. Norwich knows who they are, and they operate in that way. You had a bunch of other stuff. What do you want to get to?
Well, since we're talking about teams in the relegation fight, you want to get into Bournemouth?
Sure. What's going on with Bournemouth?
Bournemouth is, even if they do survive, and they're in that fight right now of 4 teams in 2 spots. If we're going to operate under the assumption, cover your ears at Michelle, not a lab, that Norwich is going down, that even if Bournemouth survives, they will have a sell-off of a lot of their top players, including Nathan Ake and Josh King, because finances are that bad for the club right now.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean,
and could it be the end of Eddie Howe as manager, and could Sean Dyche be his replacement if Sean Dyche is tired with his time at Burnley?
that would seem like a real step down for Sean Dyche.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're having problems with Burnley not signing guys on temporary short-term contracts, what are you going to get at Bournemouth?
Yeah.
That's that's one of the weirder things going on at the moment. I don't understand that. Why would you go to Bournemouth after that anyway?
Yeah, and there's talk of Dyche if he leaves Burnley. The two teams that were mentioned were Bournemouth, which really didn't make any sense to me, and Crystal Palace to take over for Roy Hodgson.
Who said Roy Hodgson was leaving?
Our friends at the newspaper that's not the three-letter newspaper.
Does Roy know about this?
Probably not.
That's not good.
No. So, I mean, Roy manages Crystal Palace.
He's done what they do. Like,
yeah, you're right there.
They're better than they were. They're not right there at the bottom.
No,
they're not in the bottom five. They're in the middle. Yeah. That's a step in the right direction, I guess.
Yeah. So they are what they are, and not the most exciting team in the world, but they're not in a relegation scrap where they've been in past years and having to fight their way up and finish mid-table with a sprint at the end. So I figured Dyche's time at Burnley is probably done at the end of this season. I think he has 2 years left on his deal, but I don't know why he would end up at Bournemouth, because the lack of resources that they have, where, what was the number that we said, 85% of the television revenue goes toward player salaries? Mm-hmm. That's just not a good financial outlook, and I don't know. I mean, you would have to, for me, I think you're bringing in someone either up from the Championship, or you're bringing someone in who wants that kind of a challenge to be in the Premier League, and I'll put that in quotes.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mikel Arteta is still trying to sell off Matthias Guendouzi. Guendouzi has not seen the pitch since his screaming fit at Brighton players. So they're trying to find a place where Guendouzi can go, and he has admitted to giving his instructions from the touchline in French and Spanish to throw off opponents.
He's admitted to this like it's a bad thing?
No, he admitted to it. I mean, he just says,
that's smart.
For me, absolutely nothing's wrong with it. But he just said, it's like, I give my instructions in two separate languages, in 3 languages, including English, to throw off my opponent.
There's nothing wrong with that. When I was coaching U14s, and I don't speak Spanish very well at all, I was given instructions in Spanish. And my players were speaking to one another in Spanish on the field when we played games. And we had one team have a serious problem with that. And they said it wasn't fair. And I'm like, what?
What?
They said it wasn't fair, and the referee said it wasn't fair, and the referee decided to start translating for the other team because they didn't understand. Yes, that happened.
Seriously?
Yes.
Oh,
I was blown away.
Oh,
that happened. That happened in where was it? West Georgia somewhere. I do not remember what club it was and what the involvement was. But they said it was an unfair advantage for our guys to speak Spanish and the other team not to understand what they were saying.
Wow.
Yeah. Pretty messed
let's
up.
See. Spurs are looking to possibly trade Lucas Moura to Napoli for Milic as a part of their transactions, because Lucas Moura has only scored once since December, and Jose Mourinho actually liked Hugo Lloris and Heung-min Son getting after each other yesterday in the dust-up that they had, because Lloris was apparently mad. Son didn't track back on defense, so Lloris had some choice words with him as they were heading to the tunnel at the half. They hugged it out at the beginning of the second half, but Mourinho said, they basically just kind of need to grow up a little bit.
They need to grow up a little bit, so they fought? I don't think that's what he said. That doesn't make any sense. I think he said they were maturing because of their anger with one another, which was also kind of a weird thing to say.
There you go.
They don't need to grow up a little bit because of that. He was he was happy about it. He's
Yeah.
not saying they needed to grow up because they were arguing on the pitch. He looked at it as a positive.
Yes,
he said it showed maturity.
There you go.
I don't know if there's more to it. You'd have to find the full thing, and sometimes Jose can be an interesting one to pick his brain a little bit. If you want to follow it down the road of now they're holding one another accountable for their actions on the pitch, and it came out that way, and it's not ideal, and I mean everybody said afterwards it wasn't a big deal, but they're holding one another accountable on the pitch, and that's a change from where it was before. Okay, I can follow that. I can say that shows maturity, that shows a different level of intensity, and I don't have a problem with that. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. People were riled up about it, and we've seen this all the time. We see it almost every season with every team at some point. It's okay.
Yeah. Dortmund have given Manchester United an August 10th deadline if they want Jadon Sancho, and Chelsea's looking to ship out as many as 6 players so they can have enough money to bring in Kai Havertz over the summer. 3 of the names on the list, Michy Batshuayi, Marcus Alonso, and Timo Bakayoko were 3 of the players that were on the possible outs list.
Well, when you upgrade your team in a big way, you've got some dead weight on the roster, and you got to move it. That's no shock there on Chelsea's part.
No. We haven't had the chance, because we haven't had soccer over there this week, we haven't had the chance to talk about Rangnick and AC Milan.
We've talked about it a lot. What have we not talked about?
That he could get sporting director also in addition to manager, so he could have everything in his power.
Yeah, he wouldn't have come back. He wouldn't have come otherwise. Like that was in the conversation from the beginning. Nothing's changed. It hasn't been announced yet. Reuters is reporting that it's all but a done deal. It's just when is this going to get announced? And one of the reasons why it hasn't been announced is you have a manager and he's doing well, and he's got a match with Juventus today, and you can watch it on ESPN, and you're in a weird spot because you started talking to Ralph Rangnick when things were not going well. Now they've turned around a little bit, and Stefano Pioli is kind of in a bad spot here. He's going to end up out the door. But there's no way Ralph Rangnick would have come in if he wasn't, had the ability to bring in whoever he wanted, because his style of play, you have to bring in players to match that. If you don't have a sporting director who understands that, and he's bringing in who he likes, and then you're trying to play in this way that we've seen the Red Bull teams played, and we saw Hoffenheim play when Rangnick was there, and we've seen Leipzig and Salzburg play, then you can't do that without the right players. So that's not a surprise. It's just waiting on the deal to be done. According to Fabrizio Romano at The Guardian, it's agreed upon. It's going to be 3 years. He's going to take over after the season. They just haven't announced it officially yet.
Werder Bremen stayed up yesterday after winning the playoff on away goals against Heidenheim. And Chris Ashley gets absolute credit for this. He says, in honor of the history lesson that I gave today, let's just go ahead and print the T-shirts. And for those on Twitch who are not looking at Twitter, I'm going to go ahead and flash. That's the design that Chris Ashley has come up with for those watching on Twitch for the T-shirts.
Send me the logo. We'll get it printed.
It's pretty damn sweet.
Well, we'll get it up on... Send me the logo, and we'll get it up on Teespring. You can buy it today if you want. Send me the logo, Chris.
Yeah, there you go. 5 matches in the championship starting at noon, so we'll keep an eye on those as well. What else is on your mind before we go?
Let's see. Have we missed any craziness of anything? Have not seen any anonymous Twitter accounts with anything lately. So that's good, I guess. You're getting some back and forth about Thiago leaving Bayern, and is he going to go to Liverpool, and should he go to Liverpool? And, they can afford it if they want. Yeah. We'll see if they do. Updates on the World Cup bid process for 2026. No idea when it's going to get completed, because you don't know when you're going to be able to go visit these cities, because that's part of the process. So everything's kind of up in the air. You've got time, but there's a lot more that goes into it than you think. It's not announce it the year before you're going to have the tournament. Like, you need to get everything in place quickly, because you got to book out hotel rooms. You got to book out training facilities. You got to book things out well in advance for these places. So there's a lot of work to do to make it all happen. Trying to think of anything else that's major here. Newcastle's got a bunch of injury issues. They travel to Manchester City tomorrow. Mentioned Almiron. Saint-Maximin is also a major doubt. Hayden and Longstaff are out. You've got some serious issues there and what things could look like. I see that the Fiorentina Ultras are having problems with Franck Ribéry, and I do not know the details here, but I think Franck Ribéry made a comment that they didn't really care for, and now you're getting a little bit of a back and forth. So good times with Ultras. That's always fun. And we will wait and see what happens with Manchester City. I would expect that we'll get some kind of update on that appeal here at some point. It hasn't happened yet. Right now, the plan for the Champions League this year, remember you got the second leg of round of 16 in 4 different ties here. It looks like you're going to play the return leg. It's going to be confirmed by UEFA on Friday in markets. So Manchester City would host, Real Madrid would go to them, Barcelona would host, Bayern Munich would host, and Juventus would host. Now, all of them have hosted games, and all of them have had no problems with hosting games in their leagues. So they all should be fine to host that return leg of the round of 16 before the quarterfinals go to Lisbon, and everything goes to Lisbon. UEFA is set to confirm that on Friday. So we'll hopefully get an update there here at that point. I mentioned Australia, just real quick, the situation there. So there's a spike in COVID-19 cases in Melbourne, and the border between Victoria and New South Wales is going to be closed for an indefinite period. They were trying to get Melbourne Victory, Melbourne City, and Western United on a charter flight to go to the other, or to get to Canberra, where one of the hubs is, or the hub is going to be for the A-League return, because they have one hub. It's in Canberra, and they weren't able to get it done. The fog closed the airport, so they weren't able to leave. They were on the plane. The plane was stranded on the tarmac in Melbourne as they were trying to get in before the border closing. I mean, this is getting insane. They're going to have to get exemptions from the New South Wales government, and the New South Wales Deputy Premier said, I'll be reaching out to the FFA today and see what support they need, and yes, if there's an opportunity to do so, let's bring them over the border and make sure they're part of the A-League. So John Barilaro is going to make this happen, it sounds like, and they'll be okay. They didn't have to get in before the border closed, under the cover of night. All the madness. That's where we are. That's where leagues are, trying to get things done right now. It's complicated, it's difficult, and there's going to be more complications and difficulties in MLS today. It's not going to be easy. You've got a tough decision on Nashville. They're set to play tomorrow night. I don't see any way they play tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Does that game get postponed? It could. I don't know where things stand. I would expect we'll get an update anytime now, and that'll give us more clarification on where the tournament's going to go at this point, what it's going to look like. Right now, still set for Miami and Orlando tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Neither team has had any issues with anything that's been reported on, so they are set to play to open this tournament at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow, we will get into the groups. We'll give you some predictions. We'll talk about the matches that are scheduled for tomorrow, what things look like with those, what to watch for, all of that. There'll be plenty to talk about. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of news-ish stuff to talk about as well. So that'll be tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out with us. Chris Ashley, send me that logo.
Yes.
We'll get that one up. I'm ready to get you available to buy some shirts, and we'll go from there. Buy the shirt. Mucho
Buy the shirt. Mucho patio.